Welcome to the Just Catching Up podcast. Today, the JCU crew is taking a look at The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Is it a good game? Yes. Is it a good Zelda game? Probably, but we'll discuss that. This episode was originally recorded on May 24th, 2020. Enjoy.
I like your soul patch and mustache, Jim.
I haven't for the.
Yeah,
I've trimmed it down. I was trying to go for the Dracula look. You know, I had the fine point beard.
Yeah.
It used to be much thicker, and I was like, no, I want the little tip. And then these are thinned out.
haven't shaved
put my
at
hair
all
back.
since corn.
Hello.
This is about as long as my beard gets, but
I mean, if we're talking about glorious beards, ladies and gentlemen, I believe I am the winner.
yeah.
Because holy
you
crap, look at
probably
this.
win. Sean, do you have a big beard? But Sean
need to
hasn't
shave.
been he's been having to go into work, so he may have to shave and all that.
No, I've got one going. It's,
All right.
I don't know. I don't know if it's at Ian's level. We'll have to see once I get this webcam situation figured out. We'll see.
I mean,
Nathan,
literally,
It's just better than mine.
literally
Nathan, I
all I
like
have
the
to
teeth.
do.
Yeah, I got new teeth. One and this one.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Ian, I thought you weren't allowed to drink alcohol.
This is not alcohol. This is
It's
white
grape juice.
Yeah, white grape juice because I'm not drinking alcohol right now because I've got a fatty liver and my doctor asked me
Oh
to.
no.
Yeah.
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 So we got him white grape juice so that whenever we want to drink, like Marla and I have white wine and Ian has white grape juice.
Yep.
It's fun.
Honestly, I think you're getting the better end of that deal, Ian.
I
Kinda.
do legitimately I do miss alcohol very much.
If you're just now tuning in, or if you've been listening to us for this entire time, going random for 5 minutes, this is the Just Catching Up podcast. It's just us fellas just catching up, talking about whatever random things that we wanted to talk about. So each and every episode, one of us, or maybe two of us, or maybe however many of us, I don't know, are going to bring a topic of discussion for us to basically just go over and debate and go over and talk about and basically just shoot the breeze and catch up as friends, because we don't get to do that often enough. And that's what I wanted this podcast to be about. A couple of friends just shooting the breeze, catching up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So I think we were going to go with Ian's topic to start with for today. And Ian, why don't you go ahead and tell us what your topic is?
All right, so the topic that I'm starting off, because I've been playing, during quarantine, I've been playing a lot of Zelda games. I finally got through Skyward Sword, and it frustrated the hell out of me more than any other Zelda game, because the motion controls are just awful. Like, before even the quarantine started, there was a day where I was playing the game, and I literally started screaming at the TV. But it got me thinking about a game that I really like, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is an awesome game. But the more I think about it, the more I'm wondering, is Breath of the Wild, I mean, it's a great game, but is it really a great Zelda game? Like, how much of the game is just, hey, let's do a big open world sandbox and put a Zelda skin over it, and how much of it is actually, like, a Legend of Zelda game? And that's the topic I've got for discussion today.
I would say that honestly, despite the fact that I haven't played much of Breath of the Wild and it doesn't really appeal to me, I would say it's probably the most true to form Zelda game we've had since Zelda transitioned to the 3D. It is essentially the essence of what the original Legend of Zelda game was. It was about exploring this vast world, and while there's not a lot in there, that more plays to the strengths of the games that we can make nowadays. We can have these giant sandbox worlds.
That's interesting. Nathan, you were mentioning you had something of idea as far as what Ian was going for with that topic. What was your take on it? Uh-oh, we lost Nathan's audio.
Oh.
Oh, no.
There we are.
There we go. We came back.
I had muted myself so I wouldn't have feedback when you guys were talking, and I forgot to turn it off. So I actually kind of agree with Ian on this, but now that Jim mentions that, my first Zelda game was Ocarina of Time, so that to me is what a Zelda game, like, that's the archetype of a Zelda game. You have this open world-ish. I mean, they get more open as you get along, But to me, the Zelda, like what gives Zelda its character is you have, the Link kind of hero's journey. You start as like a nobody, and you find out you're special, and you meet up with Zelda, and you have Ganondorf, and Ganondorf isn't just like a boss at the end. He's like a character who does stuff throughout the game.
Mm.
I feel like that's all missing from Breath of the Wild mostly. I mean, you do have a little bit of stuff with Zelda, but it's mostly like she's like been, I don't even remember. Is she like frozen or something? She's like a spirit or something.
Yeah, she's stuck in there. She's stuck in that castle with Ganon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken.
Um,
Been there
honestly,
for like 100 years or something.
I can kind of see why you would say that, because it does kind of come back to like to me, Ganon or Ganondorf is not really an essential part of a Zelda game. To me, it's more about exploring the dungeons, collecting various items. I mean, because let's face it, Ganon or Ganondorf aren't even the final boss of every Zelda game. There's various other ones, you know.
Right.
So I guess to me, it's more about going to these places and getting items and beating the game. But if you did start with those stories that were much more focused on the triad of Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf, I can see where you'd be coming from. And in fact, I think Ian has brought this up as an interesting point before, the idea of your perception of what makes a Zelda game or a good Zelda game kind of depends on what your first Zelda game was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it was
Definitely.
Link's Awakening and the Oracle games.
Mm-hmm.
So to me,
okay.
I've always preferred that top-down Zelda style, and to me, that's what I think of when I think of Zelda. I think of The Legend of Zelda, Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, those games before I think of things like Twilight Princess or Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, my take on it was that it was more along the lines of I don't really. Well, I kind of agree with Ian in the sense that it's kind of not a traditional Zelda game in the sense of where in previous Zelda games progression was all about, I'm going to this dungeon and in that dungeon I'm going to obtain something and there that thing is going to help me progress even further in other levels and other areas of the world, and it seemed kind of like in Breath of the Wild they give you all of that up front.
Mm-hmm.
It's like everything you need to traverse, everything you need, like everything you need for every puzzle is like presented to you right at the beginning of the game with those four powers or those four things that you get at the beginning of on that opening plateau there from those four opening temples. And it just kind of felt like where's the dungeon where you go in, you get the hook shot, you know what I mean? And where's the dungeon where you go in and you get boomerang, or you go in and you get the slingshot or the light arrows or whatever. It didn't feel like it had that kind of, okay, I'm going in this dungeon, I'm gonna get this thing is gonna help me progress through the rest of the world even more. Kind of almost like Mega Man in a sense, where you go and you fight these bosses, and then each boss gives you
Yeah.
a weapon that helps you progress even further in other levels. It kind of lost that feel for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's still a great game.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong; it's one of the best games ever made. But
So-
in the sense that a Zelda game, for what you're saying, like a traditional Zelda game, it seems like it did lose a little bit of that in transformation.
There's definitely like 2 points that I want to make on this. The first one is that the story in Breath of the Wild is very hands off, as most sandboxes have to be. You need to be able to experience the story in whatever order you can, because the game is not going to be a linear sequence of events where you go from here and then to here and to here. It's not constructed in that way. It's constructed to be a giant canvas that you can traverse from the word go. So Ganon's presence within the game, the ultimate bad guy, is kind of not really there. He's in the middle of the entire world at Hyrule Castle, and you fight him at the very end, but you don't really hear about him. You don't really ever talk to him. It's mostly a story about a lot of the other characters, but it's not really it's very disconnected from a lot of what you're doing in the game. A lot of it's very organic, but one of the big selling points with a lot of the older Zelda games is that the storyline's not organic, but it's fascinating and it's constructed in a very linear way. It's the whole idea of when you go from linear to non-linear, everything changes, and the story is definitely a big aspect to that. The other point I wanted to talk about was because Jim said earlier, this Breath of the Wild feels more like a return to form to to older Zelda games. This feels like a more authentic to the original idea Zelda game, which I actually wanted to look this up to see if I can figure this out. Because Jim, you had said this feels more like what a true Zelda game should be, except that Link's Awakening and Breath of the Wild, there were 13 other games, and it's just like how can this feel more authentic when there have been practically the majority of the entire series between the last like top-down go anywhere you want Zelda game and this one?
Let me clarify that because I think there might have been some misunderstanding in that.
Yeah.
So what I'm referring to is like if you go back to the original Legend of Zelda, a lot of the basic idea there that it built upon was you have this big world to go around, find these hidden dungeons, and even in the original game, while it would be hard, there would be ways to actually explore them slightly out of order. And I think to an extent in Link to the Past, but don't quote me on that. As opposed to things like Ocarina of Time, where it was like you get the Kokiri Stone, then the Goron Ruby, then the Zora one, then you have to find these sages in this order, or whatever. There was a bit more linearly story structure, like you said. If you go to open sandbox, you have less story structure. So that's what I'm referring to. And even within the games that had story structure, the ultimate idea within all the Zelda games, whether you're talking Twilight Princess or Wind Waker. Sorry, Ian. I think your keyboard is clicking really loud.
Sorry, I didn't real. Sorry, I was writing down some stuff. Maybe I should move my keyboard.
Just mute
No
yourself.
worries. Yeah. So what I was going to say is that even in those other games that took place between Link to the Past and this, the objective was always go explore this giant world and find the islands, find the dungeons. Whether the main change was how much of the story is there. And if you look back, there is actually another game similar to this in Link Between Worlds, because it's essentially Link to the Past, but now all the dungeon items, the key items are rentable. Like the main things you find in treasure chests are all currency items or other things to use for foraging and whatnot. But like most of the items, you don't have to go to this dungeon first to get the hook shot. You can rent or buy the hook shot if you have enough money and use it. So it kind of removes the importance of the items from the overall quest, and they really do become just your tools. I need to make sure I have these tools so I can go wherever I want. But there's not like you have to tackle this one first to get the hook shot or you're screwed. Now, some items are still there. Like I think like things like the Goron bracer or whatever, things like that, you still have to find in dungeons. But as far as like bombs, hook shots, bow and arrow, things like that, it gives you a bit more flexibility.
Yeah, I get what you're saying because, and this goes back to just some other game series that I've noticed. It's a difference between what was actually in the game and what you feel like when you were playing the game. And I think that's the big issue. Like a lot of people praise like Spider-Man, like the new Spider-Man game on PS4. A lot of people praise that game because it's not necessarily exactly like Spider-Man was on like Spider-Man 2, that one Spider-Man 2 game. It's not exactly like that, but it makes you feel the way that you did when you first played that game for the first time. And I think it seems to me like that's what you're getting at, is that when you play Breath of the Wild, it makes you feel like you did when you first played Link to the Past or when you first played Link Between Worlds. It's that feeling of Zelda that you're getting.
I see that.
Rather than the specific actions or any specific thing in the game. It's that general overall, like the first time you got on Hyrule Field in Ocarina of Time, you remember that feeling. And then you go and you play Breath of the Wild, and the first time you get off of the plateau, you feel like the same way. It's like, oh, there's this whole open world of adventure for me. It's that general feeling. And I think that's the thing that most people try to capture with remakes. You see a lot of different remakes. It's like you don't want to just remake the thing. You want to recapture that feeling that people had when they experienced the first thing the first time, and it's really hard to do. But I think some things do it better than others. I think Breath of the Wild was actually a really good example of them recapturing the original feeling. In my opinion.
I
could see that.
I think a
absolutely.
term for this that might be fitting is sort of the illusion of structure. So in some Zelda games, it's more clearly defined that you go here, then here, then here. But even in the original games, if you look when you enter each dungeon, they are labeled as level 1, level 2, level 3. It's just there's a bit of an illusory effect of I could actually go out of order in these. It might be harder, but I mean that's the same thing you mentioned Mega Man earlier. Mega Man has a rock paper scissors design for the bosses, but you can tackle them in any order. And most of the good ones actually are all the bosses are beatable from the get go. You can jump in anywhere you want. So having sort of there is a structure, but it's a loose structure. You can actually play around with it as you wish. So, and I think that's the thing is that in some of the Zelda games, like the original game, there is a structure you should take if you want to have the most logical path or the easiest path, but you have some flexibility there. Mm-hmm. When you go to Breath of the Wild, once you leave that plateau, you technically couldn't go anywhere, but some areas are still more logical. Like you're not going to run to the opposite corner of the map first. You're probably going to go to things nearby where you are, right? There's still some kind of structure.
It's definitely guiding you in a specific direction, but as opposed, excuse me, as opposed to the other games, it's not like pushing you to go in this certain direction. It's saying you're like the first thing that you see once you get off the plateau are the two giant rocks with the split in the center, and all you can think of is, well, I've got a path right in front of me, and that path is pointing towards those two rocks. I could go off towards that giant flying bird off in the distance, but you know what? I want to see those two rocks. I want to see what the hell's going on with these giant things. And
exactly.
Then you find Kakariko Village just beyond, and you're like, oh, well, this is perfect because the game was created specifically to, sort of in the same way that Mega Man X was. The very first moment is saying, you should learn how to play this game yourself, but we are giving you guidance on what is the best method to optimize that.
The illusion of structure.
Yeah.
I almost feel like each new Zelda game is kind of a reaction to the previous Zelda game.
Oh, yes, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
100%. 100%.
But like in Ocarina of Time, you get this very linear story. It's got the epic feel. And then the next game, the whole idea is you go do all these side quests, do it in whatever order you want, and it's got like this weird dark feel. And then all of a sudden, after Majora's Mask, they're like, well, that was really dark. Maybe we should brighten it up a bit. So Wind Waker, you get this
oh wow,
cartoony thing.
Yeah.
And then immediately after that, they're like, well, that's a little too cartoony. Let's go kind of back to like, let's make it kind of more like Ocarina of Time. And then you get Twilight Princess.
The only T-rated Zelda game.
And then I haven't played Skyward Sword, but my understanding is that's very, very linear, right?
Oh, God, yes.
Stylistically,
and a lot lighthearted, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Skyward Sword almost feels kind of like a medium between Twilight Princess and Wind Waker, in that it's more Twilight Princess structure, but it's a bit lighter in tone and color. It's almost like Wind Waker.
Yes.
So
it's kind of like watching a pendulum. It's kind of like watching a pendulum swing and finally find its center.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the gameplay mechanics kind of ruined that game a bit.
Yes.
But the pendulum didn't stop swinging with Skyward Sword because all of a sudden that linearness and the like. Well, I think the graphics are kind of the same in Breath of the Wild, but like Breath of the Wild is the opposite of linear. It's like do whatever you want, whenever you want. Just go this way, go to that mountain, see that bird over there, go to that bird, do whatever you want. And I feel like the next Zelda game is going to be a little less sandboxy and is going to have a little more story. That's kind of my prediction.
Except that the next game's going to be Breath of the Wild 2. It's literally called Breath of the Wild 2.
But
also, I feel
Majora's
like
Mask.
No, I agree with Nathan here.
Mm-hmm.
But Majora's Mask was a direct sequel to Ocarina.
Exactly. That was my point.
It could be more different than Ocarina of Time, except for the graphics, which are basically the same. But like.
At the same time, Nathan, you have to consider that, like, if Breath of the Wild is really well received, then they're going to say, oh, we should make more of this. This is what they want.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
So there might be a pendulum, but there's also Nintendo themselves.
Yeah, but I think all of the games have had, like, good reception with the possible exception of Skyward Sword. But even that, I think, has, like, a 90% on whatever the equivalent of Rotten Tomatoes is for video games.
No,
Also,
the generally Skyward Sword is well received. It's just that hardcore Zelda fans don't really like the mechanics of it. Like, other than the mechanics, Skyward Sword is actually a pretty solid Zelda game.
It's actually one of the things that really annoyed me when the game came out is that, once again, just because it's one of those big AAA games, it kind of received perfect 10s across the board from almost every single critic when it first came out.
Yeah.
But every single person who has played it since then has been like, well, you know, the motion controls aren't that great and this and that. Like, people have been more critical critical of it as time went on. But yeah, when it first came out, tens across the board. Like
Yeah,
almost
so
every single reviewer did.
my
Also,
thing
go
is
ahead.
with this new Breath of the Wild 2. Like, you guys have seen like the trailer for that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the one that.
So I
It's a really small trailer, right? Like
yeah,
Yep.
very
yeah,
little info in it.
very very little in it. So like what I got from that trailer is essentially a very linear type of story. It seemed like, oh, okay, you guys thought you guys were mad because there was no story. We're gonna give you story in your story, so you can story while you story.
Yeah.
Also, if I could just throw this in there, Nintendo has shown that they can try to appeal to multiple Zelda fan groups at once. I mean, look at Wind Waker again, for example. Like, hey, some people really like the style. Let's make more of this. They made Phantom Hourglass. They made Spirit Tracks, and even some of the other top-down ones that came out, like Minish Cap and the Four Swords games. They play off of that Toon Link style,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
opposed to the Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild model. So they're still trying to like play both ends of that.
Mhm.
It's
Like,
just one is more
Worlds.
focused on the handheld games and the other is
I
more on
would
the consoles.
almost qualify, and just maybe this is just from the graphics, but I would qualify like Skyward Sword as Toon Link.
Oh, I wouldn't at all.
No,
Would
no,
not.
no, 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 no.
I think it's like somewhere halfway between Toon Link and
It's got
Twilight
that. I guess
Princess.
they build it as like an impressionist art style, which sounds super cool.
If you look at the three Link models from Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, and Toon Link, there is a huge difference between Toon Link and the other two.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, yes, the Skyward Sword one is lighter in color and a bit brighter, but he still looks more like Twilight Princess Link, at least in my opinion, than Toon Link. Toon Link looks like a little kid and a very much a cartoony little kid.
Toon Link kind of like he's got a big round head and a short stocky body, and Twilight Princess Link and Skyward Sword Link look like reasonably proportioned people, human beings.
If you're looking for the Sasquatch there, I think it would be Ocarina of Time Link. Like that,
Yeah.
that missing
Look
link
at this
right,
little guy.
that literal missing link right in between Toon Link and Skyward Sword Link
Also-
would probably be Ocarina of Time Link.
Also, Jim,
But
there's no video aspect to this podcast. People can't see
Oh.
what I'm holding up.
Well,
So-
you guys
so you'll
are
have to
on video,
describe
I can
it.
see you can see.
We can see it. It helps us to be.
For those of you who don't have video, I was holding up a toy of Toon Link to show Nathan how much different Toon Link is from the other Links.
I gotcha. But you're saying that the difference is Link himself, not the art style he's presented
Yeah,
in.
the character
Yeah.
model Link, not the
Gotcha.
art style of the whole game.
Yeah,
Yes.
I gotcha.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
It is kind of like one thing that definitely makes me wonder about this is that I love Breath of the Wild, and I've put probably 100 hours or so into it. By the way, Master Quest sucks. Oh my god, it sucks because it's so damn hard. But
Master what?
when you beat the game,
No, I'm kidding you. I know it.
Full disclosure, if Ian has put in 100 hours to Breath of the Wild, that's about 95 more hours than I put into it.
Oh,
I haven't played it since the week it came out.
100%ed that Joker, man.
I haven't played Breath in the Wild in over a year, but according to my Switch, I put in 300 hours into that.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Good lord.
There you go. But
Yeah.
a big question I have about the game structure itself is because I've played other sandbox games. I've played, Fallout New Vegas. I've played Far Cry 3 and a bit of 4. And the big question I have is Breath of the Wild, while being a great game, feels like sort of a great sandbox. Nintendo took a lot of aspects of other sandbox games and just sort of put the best elements into all of them. But does it really feel like a Zelda game, or does it feel like someone modded a sandbox game with Zelda assets? That's the one thing that I'm kind of having trouble with.
Which goes back to how you
agree.
define it. Goes back to how you define a Zelda game.
Yeah.
How do you, Ian, define a Zelda game?
Well,
I think that's an issue you're seeing not just with Zelda. That's an issue that's going on with another game series I really like, Assassin's Creed.
yeah.
They're having much the same problem so far as they had a series of games that were basically just stealth, kind of action adventure stealth game, very strictly that.
Yep.
And then they kind of changed things up because they basically ran that formula into the ground to the point where nobody wanted to buy it anymore. So now they're trying to reinvent themselves, and they're in a place where right now it's just like, well, we want to do these things that are popular, that we want to engage in these elements of gaming that everybody loves, open world. We want to engage in exploration. We want to engage in kind of RPG elements.
Yeah.
And it seems like seems like Breath of the Wild does a lot of the same thing. It's like open world. It's kind of survival elements. The limited inventory things. That kind of stuff that is really popular right now, and it's trying to find a new identity for itself. And I think that's where you're getting right now. Is it doesn't seem like a real Zelda game because it's basically Zelda trying to figure itself out.
Mm-hmm.
It's going on a sabbatical in Europe. It's going backpacking through backpacking through the Alps trying to find itself.
One thing that I do like about earlier Zeldas is how even with the top down kind of go anywhere Zeldas like Breath of the Wild or well, I mean, yes, but like Link to the Past, Link Between Worlds in the original game, is that every time you acquired a new item, you would unlock new corners of the map that you could go to. Every time
Right.
you would get a new and each dungeon would give you a new item. In Breath of the Wild, you have all 6 items you need to explore the entire world once you're done with the starting area. And each of the dungeons are technically optional. And so, because you can beat the final boss without them, so the problem is going into the dungeons is just sort of a fun puzzle for you and to help sort of establish Link's background and establish Zelda's background. But because they have to be optional, nothing really happens in the dungeon. It's mostly just, hey, do you want this challenge of going inside this giant elephant and doing some puzzles and then fighting a boss? Sure, if you want to. Or you can just gather up a bunch of like weapons, storm Hyrule Castle, and fight all the bosses in there all at once.
Question about this, because again, I haven't played much of the game. Are there things like Triforce pieces or things like that to collect in this game? Like, is there any?
Not
things
really.
Nope.
Like that?
Nope.
No?
For Breath of the Wild, no.
Nope.
Huh.
You can like
So-
the speedrunners of the game basically like it takes them about 20 minutes to get through the entire opening area, and then they kind of glitch themselves into Hyrule Castle and fight the final boss. That's it. You can beat the entire game in 30 minutes with like very minimal glitching, or maybe an hour with no glitches.
Yeah, if you're but it's skill based
Yes.
essentially.
Yeah.
Very skill based,
Mhm.
essentially. I think this is the quintessential failing of pretty much any do what you want kind of game.
Hmm.
Yeah.
In so far as that, if you're given the freedom to do whatever it is that you actually want, there's no real structure
Hmm.
for you to say, okay, there's no real structure for you to build any kind of legitimate like story or lore or character development or anything along those lines. There's you can't really build that because everybody's going to do something different.
Uh,
So
yeah.
I can't have a character development at point A if if the person playing the game is going to go to point B, C, and D first.
Yeah.
Character development needs to be A, B, C, D, but you can't do that if character can go wherever they want.
The other big issue with these kind of sandboxes, and Breath of the Wild doesn't do this nearly as much, but that a lot of the big sandbox games end up just being a giant checklist. It feels like you're just going through like a chores list. Like, okay, go here, fight this dude, check. Go here, deliver this thing, check. Go here, check this thing out, check. Like, that's all it is. It's just a big checklist of go here, fight a guy, or go here and deliver a thing. And Breath of the Wild, like, once you get 40 hours in, yes, you're doing a giant checklist, but a lot of good sandboxes, like, say, Witcher or Fallout, make it feel less about just going through the checkboxes and more like you're actually creating an adventure for yourself. Breath of the Wild does that well. I'm just not sure it does it the best.
Isn't there still like story and growth? Like I remember, like there's the memories or the photos or something.
Yep, there are 12 memories that you have to gather, yeah. And they
So
yeah,
They can essentially happen in any order.
yes.
So it sounds to me like the main thing that this game is missing, like what I think what would improve it, is if they made the dungeons have a purpose, whether that means like collecting a Triforce piece or an orb, a gemstone,
Yeah.
something, so that you actually had to go to all the dungeons. Now, having the flexibility to go in any order does still, that's still a thing. You could make it to where some dungeons are easier than others. Sure, if you're like build like a challenge to that, but like I think that's the main thing missing because again, I feel like this structure is what the Legend of Zelda was always building towards. The idea of exploring the world feels like that is at the core of the original Legend of Zelda game, and that just seems to me like this was inevitable. Once this technology was now available, this was the time for them to explore that.
Yeah, that is.
To be fair, there is a reason to go to the dungeon because you do get a power from each of the dungeons.
Well, you
By
also
defeating.
they also you get a giant mechanical beast that'll help you fight Ganon.
Yeah.
So each
Well,
time,
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, each
but I'm
time
talking
you
about
defeat.
the actual abilities that you get for beating each of the dungeons.
Oh
You get
yeah,
that
well,
shield, and then you get the jump power,
Yeah.
and then you get the other thing, the two
Okay,
other
so
things. You
there
get
is
the
purpose for the
swimming
dungeons.
thing. I can't remember.
they're
It's-
they're
To
minor
me, the
they're minor
problem with
combat abilities though is the
Yeah.
problem. They
to
don't
me,
really help the world explore. They mostly just help you fight other guys. And
But
so
that
it's
still seems like that should be the idea then, because the whole purpose to explore dungeons is to become stronger.
Yeah,
Whether that
but
means
those
getting a
things
new
just
item
aren't
or a new
necessary.
skill. Yeah, but I mean that's kind of the should be that's. I
Yeah.
don't think that's a bad thing because, like I said, with the Mega Man games, you can go in any order. If you want to do a Buster only run, you can. You have the option of
Mhm.
making things harder for yourself. But if you want to make things a bit easier, you can go to these places and get new weapons or get new abilities or whatever. It's like in RPGs when you have like the skill trees. You want to put more skill into your attack, damage output or your defense and how
Yeah.
much damage you take. So that kind of player choice,
Mhm.
that sounds like, again, having not played this that much, that sounds like the purpose of the dungeons. And if that's the purpose of them, that sounds pretty good to me.
yes,
To me, the problem with the dungeons isn't so much that they're not even bad dungeons and there is some purpose to them. The problem is first of all there's only 4 and they're all exactly like the other ones.
Yeah.
And to me, like the thing about the dungeons in previous Zelda games is there's like a complete unique mood to each one. Think about Ocarina of Time. Like the first adult dungeon, I'm thinking of the adult dungeons, is the Forest Temple, and it has this like weird, like the world has moved on, like post-apocalyptic almost feeling.
Yep.
And then the second one you go to is just like this volcano you go into, and they're just like totally different from one another, and they help kind of even if the game itself is shorter, it feels longer because you have all these different milestones in the game. Oh, remember when you went to the spirit dungeon? That's this like weird desert dungeon, and there's also the under the wall dungeon. In Breath of the Wild, I don't remember, other than like to get to the dungeons, like what exactly is the difference between the desert elephant dungeon and the mountain bird dungeon? I feel like they're the exact same dungeon, just in different places on the map.
They do have the same feel is a big issue. And that's again with that hands-off approach with sandbox game design. Because they have to be played in this same order, all of the ways that you beat them are kind of similar, but at the same time there isn't really a other than like when you're in the volcano, you're outside, you're like, okay, I'm obviously in a volcano, but inside the dungeon itself, it just feels like, oh, this looks the exact same as the other 3 giant beasts. I can't remember their name. That's gonna completely mess me up. But yeah, because
Guardian Beast.
Guardian Beast. Thank you. Yeah. Um, all 4 of the Guardian Beast dungeons look the same on the interior, but occasionally, if you're able to look outside, you can be like, oh, I can see that there's sky out there, or oh, I can see that there's a volcano out there, or oh, I can see that there's some water out there, but the interior always looks the same.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair point because not only are like in all the previous Zelda games, like the dungeons have their own unique designs, like Nathan was saying, but the dungeons also serve a very important purpose in a Zelda game. And that while the overworld is where a lot of the combat happens, say for boss battles, dungeons are where the puzzles happen.
Yeah.
Those are where you're supposed to like figure out how to overcome things. Now, even in something like Link Between Worlds, if you go into a dungeon and you don't have the right tool, you can leave the dungeon, go find the dude, and buy. If I need to have bombs, I need to go buy bombs. You can come back and do that. You can there's warp abilities and things like that you can utilize in a lot of those games. So you can still find ways to have open world where you have all your tools accessible early on, and then the puzzles give you variety where certain items are more useful than others, or it really comes down to how you think around the puzzles.
Mhm.
Like that should be where the dungeons shine. And if the dungeons are all the same with no unique identity, whether in art design or in puzzle design, that could definitely be something that would make it feel unnecessary.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to whether or not it was a time issue, or
Mm.
whether that was just like a design decision from the start to be that way, or if it was just a thing like, oh, we're running out of time, we need to hurry up.
Was this a launch title for the Switch?
No.
Yeah, it was.
No.
Yeah.
It
I
was.
think it came out
It
on
literally
Wii
came
U
out the
first.
day the Switch launched. It
If,
literally
if that's
came
the
out on
case,
launch
then
day.
if that's the case, then it might have been a time thing. They might have wanted to like
It was
rush out
one
for
of the
launch.
But it
yeah,
was
one of the
supposed
few
to.
games that came out on launch day.
Right, but it was
It was
supposed to come out
on the
Wii
it was
U.
supposed to come out on the Wii U
Yeah.
uh, a
It's
long time ago, but again, it kept getting delayed. That's why I say that it might have been a time issue, because they were already running into issues with
right.
getting delayed, where they were kind of running out of time as far as they
And-
weren't hitting deadlines.
right.
And they wouldn't want to put out the Wii U version first because that would hinder the sales for the Switch.
They put them
So if
both out at
anything-
the same time, sort of in the
Yeah.
same way with Twilight Princess.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, because I remember they'd been working on the Zelda, like the big Zelda sandbox, for a while, but they did have to delay it. I can't remember why. Well, every Zelda game's been delayed, I think. Yeah, because I remember Twilight Princess was supposed to come out well before the Wii came out, but then they decided to make a version for the Wii as well, so that they could release both on GameCube and the Wii. But yeah, I think offhand I can't really remember.
Because I'm looking at the situation where you've got a system which wasn't selling,
Yeah,
which is the Wii U, and then you've got a system that is a huge gamble, which the Switch was. And
Yep.
like, remember before the Switch came out, no one knew if this thing was actually gonna do anything. Everybody was kind of like, well, it looks innovative, but is it gonna hit?
yeah,
Is it going to be just another
Everybody
Wii
was
U?
kind of like, yeah, everybody was like, is this gonna be another Wii U? And you're coming off of a system that's already basically failed your last generation,
Mhm.
and now here you are with a very risky gamble, and and they didn't really have a lot of games that came out with launch on the Switch. If you remember, I think Breath of the Wild was one of the few games that they had that was a system mover.
right.
So
I think they
like,
also had Mario Kart 8, but that was ported from the Wii U.
yeah.
The thing you got to remember though, like with Nintendo systems,
No,
are like
actually, it did. No,
Nintendo's-
Mario Kart didn't launch. Mario Kart was not a launch title.
Oh,
I think it was just Breath of the Wild. I think there was Arms.
oh yeah,
Um,
no one plays Arms.
Wasn't Mario Odyssey one?
Odyssey.
No,
did-
Mario Odyssey didn't come out until the end of the year.
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
And the Switch came out in March.
But the thing is, you gotta remember, like with Nintendo consoles, it's kind of like an investment. Like if when PlayStation or Xbox releases a new console, it's like, how many games do you know they're going to release that from big name systems? With a Nintendo system, you're almost guaranteed a new Mario platformer, Zelda, Mario Party, Mario Kart, Metroid on
Brothers.
almost all of them. Say what?
Smash Brothers.
Smash Bros. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So there were a lot of things like, what? Even if there's not a lot now, I know they are going to be making more games in these
Yeah.
franchises I like. So it's an investment that I'm willing to put in. Whereas when like PlayStation comes out with a new system, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to wait and hear what they're going to release. I mean, that's what ruined the Vita.
Yeah.
They didn't have enough games to make people want to spend money on the thing. Whereas the 3DS, people knew they were going to get new Pokemon games. People knew they were going to get new Fire Emblem games. People, like a lot of the big franchises, they knew that they're going to make something of this. There's no way they're not going to.
That's fair.
True, but I think still, before the system came out, it was kind of like a big thing of, are they even going to get the chance to before, because there's only so much market share and mind share that people have. Like, are they even going to get the chance to get to these games before we've completely moved on from what this system is to, whatever other people have put out a system, Google Stadia.
True. There is a time window they need to fit within. Like they don't say like, yeah, we'll make a new Mario game in 2 years. That's too long to wait. Like by the end of the year, I think Mario Odyssey. I don't think it was too late. Like I think that was
No,
kind of
it was
coming
by
out
the
the
end
point
of
where
that
it's like, hey,
year.
about damn time.
But by that time, the Switch had hit it. By that
Yeah.
time, everybody knew, okay, the Switch is good.
Mhm.
Everybody realized, okay, this is a solid thing, and I think the portability of it helped make it that solid thing. because it came out in a time where a lot of other games were coming out for the other platforms. A lot of other big games were coming out for the other platforms, but here was the Switch, this thing that everybody could take with, and it hit the gaming industry right at a time when everybody was traveling. In
Yeah.
addition to that, because you had E3, you had all the games comms, all the other conferences. So a lot of the people, a lot of the tastemakers, and all those people, they were already traveling.
Mm-hmm.
So now you've got this game system that you can play while you travel. So I think that just helped it hit.
Oh, definitely. The portability was such a great thing because I mean, there were times where I would be taking my high schoolers to forensics tournaments, and we'd then they're like, okay, let me pop out the Switch. Here's some extra controllers. Let's play some Mario Kart.
Yeah.
You know, being able to sit at a lunch table at a school and just set up some of that quick. Here's the console. Get your controllers, sit around the console, and it worked. Like we didn't need to get a TV. It wasn't like everyone had to have their own device. It really fit that portability well.
It also helps that Nintendo's been a big curator of small indie games. Like every time you go on the Switch, there's always about Switch Store. There's about a dozen different games. I'm like, I've never heard of this before, but they're $5 or $1, and it's something that you can just be like, well, let me download this and test it. And being able to help curate a lot of those small indie games is what helped the iPhone first become as big as it did, because back in around it would have been around like 2006 to 2009, there were a ton of small indie developers that realized, oh, we could make a small game for this and get our names out there. Of course, now those are oversaturated with micropayments, and I'm not going to touch on that right now, but it does also seem to help whenever a console is able to be like, hey, here's some people with $1,000 and a funny little game idea. Let's put it on our console. Seems to also be good for the life of the console. The Xbox 360 also did the summer arcade thing for a while, where they would release a bunch of small indie games made by people who have $10 in their pockets, but all of a sudden, oh hey, here's Limbo, here's Braid, here's Racketeer. No, Racketeer came out later, but yeah, no, Limbo, Raid. Here's some Braid. Here's some smaller games that people can play from unknown developers, and it does seem to be a consistently good thing for a console's lifestyle to be able to pander to the little indie guys.
I got a really cool
Rocketeer?
indie game recently. It's called Witcher 3.
I mean, look.
Technically, you're not wrong. That is an indie game.
No, CD Projekt Red is an independent studio, and they completely, just did that
right.
themselves. So you're not wrong.
The independent AAA
Of course
studio.
I knew that when I said that.
One of the few independent AAA studios out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, and that's an interesting thing though to bring back Witcher for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's one of the few games where it's got the open world element and it manages to get it right. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you don't start off with kind of like a blank page of a character.
Right.
I think it's because it has like 3 books to base characters off.
Yeah, exactly. It has like a whole series of books to base characterization off of, versus Zelda. Zelda's never really been a series where you have any character to Link
No.
at all, really. Link has always been kind of a stand-in for you.
Yes.
Kind
That's
of a
his-
silent
the whole
protagonist
game.
stand-in for you. I mean, that's always been. So I think
Not
that
iconic.
that doesn't help. Yeah, that doesn't help in a situation where you're trying to establish character and you don't have any kind of story, or basically the story has to be non-linear, or basically just as you go, whatever order you want to do the story in. It's not going to help if you have just this blank page of a character, which is why I think this is probably the most character development Link has ever gotten in a Zelda game.
Yeah.
I would argue Wind Waker.
Maybe, probably. I don't remember playing too much of Wind Waker, but
Wind Waker is one of the few Zelda games where Link can actually convey an actual personality, can convey
Yeah.
emotions.
I would agree with you that Zelda gets more character development in Wind Waker.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tetra's a much more interesting character than Link, but Link is.
Spoilers?
I'm sorry, spoilers from 17 years ago. Who's angry about a 17-year spoiler? Who's angry?
Also, with Link and Wind Waker, you have the dynamic of the grandmother and the younger sister who actually do contribute to the plot a bit more. I mean, okay, Link to the Past had his uncle. Whoop-de-doo, he dies in the first 5 minutes. Sorry, Nathan, spoiler. But, I mean, Wind Waker gives more character development and, plot points. I mean, they weren't a great plot points. They weren't, like, a lot to do with the grandma. But, she gives him the clothes and, you make sure you say goodbye to your grandma before you leave home, right? So it had some stuff.
I mean, like, Breath of the Wild, probably, though, I think Link gets, the second most development for a Link character in the entire series. Because you actually get some of his backstory, you get an idea of his personality in journal entries and the memories and all of that stuff. So I think
you also see that he's got the relationship with Misha,
right? Mm-hmm. But you still don't get anywhere near enough for you to be able to do a game like what they did, in order to just where the story's just jumping around back and forth all over the place. In order to do it effectively anyway. Which I think is one of the major gripes about Breath of the Wild is that the story was one of the biggest, I think, complaints from the fan base, other than, just the dungeons and the bosses of the dungeons essentially being the exact same boss 4 times. So, yeah, I think, when it comes to that, I think that's the approach of your main character is definitely going to be exactly what says this game is going to be good, this story is going to be good, or this story is going to be bad. Is basically where is that approach for the main character, and are you using basically the right type of game for that particular type of main character? So you can do the kind of blank page character, but it has to be in a certain world where everybody else around that character has a lot of character and a lot of just presence. You look at something like Star Wars, right? And think about Luke is the main character of Star Wars, but can you think of any like major lines Luke has in like the first 3 movies, or do you remember all of Han or Leia's lines?
In the first 3, no. I would argue that in Last Jedi he has a whole hell of a lot of character.
Right. Fair enough, but he's a side character.
Right. Yeah. Right. That point, he's no longer the main character.
No.
So as the main character, he has like no presence in the first 3 movies, like the original trilogy.
No,
but
the purpose
everybody
of
else has the presence.
Yeah, the purpose of Luke in the original story is that he's supposed to be sort of the blank everyman that any 20-something or teenage white boy from the 70s look out and go, that's like me. I
want
like
to go to
that.
Toshi Station and pick up some power converters.
Yeah.
Or me, and I can just look at him and go, that's like me, except he's white.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're right, though. Han and Leia are certainly much more memorable and interesting characters than Luke in the first 2 movies.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Hell, the droids.
So you've got this kind of neutral mask, I think is the term that they use.
Well, actually, the first Star Wars movie is based on Kura Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress.
And also Man of a
I'm
Thousand
not
Faces.
sure if Luke Skywalker is in Hidden Fortress, like if there's an analog in that. I think he's like and I could be wrong about this. I'm probably wrong about this. But he could just be like the hero's journey plopped on top of Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress.
I wouldn't doubt that for a second. That sounds like something that Lucas would do.
So Lucas took a lot of inspiration from like Flash Gordon and a lot of old serials from the 50s and previous, a lot of the like smaller science fiction films to be able to help make Star Wars. Star Wars is really truly, the original was a pastiche of a bunch of ideas thrown together, and it really kind of created the best elements from all of them. This is why the original film works so well. And I have my own opinions about Star Wars, but we won't get into that.
So if I
talk about that on
take
another
this back to the video game side of it, though. So it seems to me like there's 2 basic ideas when you're making these games that have multiple entries in a series. You have things like your Uncharted games, which are literally 1, 2, 3, 4 in an order. Right. And to a lesser extent, your things like, or also like Metroid is another great example where there is a clear storyline to the Metroid games. Right. To a lesser extent, you got your Sonics and Marios where they do have a timeline order, but you don't really have to play them in that order. But then on the other end of that, you get things like Zelda here or Castlevania, where there is a timeline, but the games are so far removed from each other that they don't really impact the story that much. So I think like one of the best examples of how to do that right is look to the RPGs and tactical games. Think about the Final Fantasies and the Fire Emblems, games like that, where there are timelines, there are histories, but each game works as its own story because, like what Sean was saying, the world around them is so fleshed out. Look at like if you play an RPG, usually you might have a blank slate character, but the party is and the story is what really makes it sell. And
Exactly.
Zelda has always been about Link by himself on his journey. Maybe he has Navi or Tattle or whatever, Fee, whatever, but it's still mostly Link. It's one side voice in his head saying, "Hey, listen."
Right.
And that's the thing, is to make these games stand out.
Hey, listen.
You need to have an interesting story to really make the character feel like they're growing.
Right.
If you're going to have these games where they're all removed like that.
There, like a couple of analogs to that, like the film analog to that would be, I don't know if anyone else has watched this, but the Mad Max series. Max Rokitansky as a character is more just sort of like the observer, the narrator. Stuff happens to him, but what's more interesting is the characters around him. Is what a lot of people kind of forgot about Fury Road, and they're like, Max not really the main character. Max has never been the main character.
Never been a main character.
He's the observer, the person who watches all this stuff happen. The other aspect to that, from a video game standpoint, is the Half-Life series. Gordon Freeman, especially the first one, second one not so much, but the first one is very much Gordon Freeman is just like, of course the main character gets out alive. No, Gordon Freeman is the guy who survives this whole thing because there were 6 zillion people in Black Mesa and most of them died. It just so happens that we follow him because he's the one who just happened to get out. If one of the other scientists got out, guess what? We would have followed them instead. It's just that they're kind of the blank slate character meant to sort of be you in that situation, observing the world around you and going, wow, aliens shooting us up. It's pretty weird.
And
that's the neutral mask in pretty much a nutshell, is that, it's that character who's basically just a stand-in for the audience.
Yeah.
And I think this is probably why Majora's Mask works as well as it does and why it's so beloved, because think about how much life is brought to the game from the townsfolk.
Oh yeah.
What the Deku Swamp, the Gorons in the mountain, the people in Clocktown, all those side quests that make up the bulk of the game really flesh out the area and makes it interesting. That's why I like going back to that game, not for Link, but because I like the town people. I like the stories.
But
I think Breath of the Wild just lacks a lot of that.
But
I don't think there's enough of it in Breath of the Wild to actually form a cohesive circle around Link to basically complete the whole. It's basically just you got the hole in the middle of the donut with no donut around it.
Right.
Bigger map, smaller world.
The other thing about Majora's Mask that I really like, and is actually incorporated into the storyline, is that Link himself completely goes through the game. Most people don't even register his presence. Everyone in the world seems to sort of just be in denial about, the moon's not going to crush us, we don't really care. But that also, the characters that get attributed, hey, we got helped by this person, were the transformation masks that Link wore. People remember the Deku Scrub helping them out. They remember the Goron helping them out. They remember the Zora helping them out. Link goes through that whole game until the very end when he gets to talk to Tattletale, Skull Kid, and the mask salesman are the only people who actually know, oh yeah, you're the person who saved the world. Everyone else was just like, who, Link? Was he that green clothed kid? I don't really remember him. I don't register him at all. And that's I think Majora's Mask is probably the best example of the whole of the completely disconnected character that we can just insert ourselves into, because no one else in the entire game remembers you, because you're just the memorable people were the masks of the people who you wore. Oh hey, Doreen is back. Oh hey, Mikau, is that the guy's name? Mikau.
Something like that, yeah.
The Zora. They remember those guys, just they don't remember you.
And the funny thing also with that is that because it's centered around Clocktown, like a small village area, there's more life there. Most of the Zelda games, your goal is Hyrule Castle. There might be a Kokiri village, but nothing really major happens there. There might be a Hyrule town, but nothing really major happens there. It's most about get to the castle and fight the boss. Whereas most things are centered around Clocktown or the little areas around it, but always Clocktown is that central hub. So you spend more time with the people in the world rather than the dungeons and the final castle.
Sure. Also, Majora's Mask has kind of a living clock town. A lot of the people in there are constantly moving around, and whenever you reset those 3 days, you get to see them experience all those events once again. It really, like, Clocktown is one of the best designed cities in the entire Zelda series because it really feels like these are people who are going about their daily lives. It helps by the fact that they're stuck within that 3 day time loop, so they can only do so much and they don't constantly like change. But it's one of the best ways to sort of make the world feel a bit more organic than it normally does, rather than just being characters who stand there and go, "Welcome to Rivendell.
Yes.
Hi, what can I help you with?" It's not just people like that. It's people who are actually going through their daily routines. Is the big,
Exactly.
you know.
Compare that to Hyrule Town or Courtyard, or whatever, in Ocarina of Time, where it's like you can see the sun rising and setting, but the people are always doing the same thing.
Yep.
At least in Clocktown, you have that 3 day cycle, so it makes sense that they're being repetitive. It doesn't feel fake. It doesn't feel out of place. It feels natural because they are stuck in a cycle.
Yep.
Literally. Not just from game design, but because it's 3 days.
It's part of the things where the design aspect of the game helps inform the story of the game, which is really hard to do in game design.
Yeah.
I have a question. Do you guys have a top 5 Zelda games? I just
Ooh.
came up with my own top 5.
I have to think of them right now.
That's what you were doing. I was like, what is Nathan doing?
I have this website called Preference Revealer, and you can put in a list of items, and then it will have you do like matchup head to head, like which one of these two things do you like better? Do you like Majora's Mask or Ocarina of Time better? You click which one, and then after you clicked them down enough times, then I'll just go ahead and copy this into
Yeah, I
our
remember
chat.
that.
Yeah,
'Cause
send
I
it to the
used
chat.
I used it to rank my Marvel movies.
Same
like,
here.
Way back in the day.
So, my top 5 Zelda games, and I've only played the 3D ones and not Skyward Sword. So these are basically I've played a couple other ones, but my top 5 are 1, Majora's Mask, 2, Ocarina of Time, 3, Breath of the Wild, 4, Wind Waker, 5, Twilight Princess.
I'm gonna go ahead and just copy that.
What do you think of my list there, fellas?
That's
I'm
a
gonna go ahead and
solid
copy that list. That's probably my list.
You said you put it in the chat?
Yeah, he put it in the Facebook chat.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I thought you were gonna put it like in the meeting chat.
No.
Know how to do that.
Oh, gosh.
Well,
Well, now I gotta go back to Facebook.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna go ahead and go with that list because that's actually a pretty solid list. Majora's Mask is probably, I think that's probably a like controversial choice for most people to put it over Ocarina, but I would definitely put it over Ocarina.
It's tough for me because Ocarina has definitely more nostalgia, but it does at times, and I think it's just because it was an earlier game, feels kind of empty when you're running around the world.
Yeah,
exactly.
that can happen.
And I think that Majora's Mask probably has a lot more, just life to it. But I think, like you said, that's probably part of the fact that it's a direct sequel.
Right. They
where we
take
took
all the
lessons
things of Ocarina and then improve upon them, whereas Ocarina didn't have really any other 3D Zelda games or any others.
Yeah. So
This
it's like,
is-
okay, we're
Yeah,
learning. We took all the lessons we learned from Ocarina. We've improved upon them. So now we're going forward, and it's a much better game, in my opinion.
I mean, I can just list my 5. I know what they are off the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's Ocarina's first, just because that was the first real adventure game I ever got into. Majora's Mask, Breath of the Wild, the Oracle games, both of them, and Wind Waker.
Okay.
Okay. Oracles. I'm
Oracle.
trying to remember playing. No, I remember the name. I'm just trying to remember playing them.
Yeah.
It's like
The
I
Oracle
do remember
games.
playing them. They were actually pretty solid, if I remember correctly. Those
Oh,
are
yeah.
the ones on Game Boy Color, right?
Yep, they were the ones who had the link connection where you could actually get. You beat one of the games all the way through, then you send
And
a
then you go play
password.
the other one. Yeah.
You send a password
I
to the other
remember.
one, which will allow you to unlock bonus items in both games.
Yeah.
And so you can get like bomb chews, like 2D bomb chews, which are fascinating and weird to play
How do
with.
those work in 2D? Like the whole point is they go up the walls, right?
Right. They essentially, you just set them down, they start to move a little bit, and then they move super fast and like fly to something and blow it up, essentially.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Hmm.
It was pretty cool for a 2D Game Boy top-down Zelda game.
Hmm. I remember in God the Oracle games you can get the Bigoron sword, which is mostly terrible in the Oracle games because it's this giant ass sword, and Link. It takes forever for him to swing the whole thing because it covers it. The sword's like twice as big as he is. You press it, Link pulls it out, holds it, swings it across the screen, and then puts it back. And it takes like a couple of seconds to do the entire animation, and it feels very clunky and slow.
Well, it's a big giant sword, Ian. We can't all be Cloud Strife and just run around with big giant swords all day,
Yes, but it
swinging
means
them
that I
around
don't.
like they're nothing.
Yes, it just means that I don't want to use the sword whenever, like, oh, I got the big Goron sword. Neat. I'll just use the Master Sword for the rest of the game. I don't need to use the level 4 one.
All right, Jim, what do you got?
I'm doing the test right now because honestly, this is really hard for me. Like
Yeah.
the first one, like come back to me in a moment. Let me finish taking the test because I'm curious to see what it says after I do this.
Mm-hmm.
The tricky thing, and I've heard that if you don't have a preference, like if two of the like one of the matchups, you're like, I don't know which one of those I like better. If you click it randomly, they should. I don't know how this works, and
Okay.
as a math guy, you might be able to tell me, but they should show up one and then the other.
So I finished it, and honestly, it's probably not that far from what I would have picked. Because for me, the easy one is Majora's Mask is hands down my favorite.
Sure.
I love that game,
Same.
everything in the story and the tone and the style. After that, it's most of the 2Ds. So I would probably say the Oracle games and Link's Awakening are kind of tied, especially since the remake of Link's Awakening, I loved it.
No,
But
yeah.
on my results, it came out as Oracle for 2 and Link's Awakening for 3. And then you're gonna get to like the big ones, because like I don't have the same kind of nostalgia that most people have for Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time.
Yeah.
So really, it comes down to I prefer Link to the Past because of the style. I prefer the 2D Zelda games to the 3D ones, but neither of them are really that high on my list. I don't think either of them would really be in my top 5, honestly. The ones that probably would, though, Link Between Worlds. I like it just because it feels like it's Link to the Past, but frankly better. I feel like it fixed a lot of things. And I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for this. Adventure of Link and Legend of Zelda. So the first 2 games in reverse order.
Oh wow!
I am one of the few people I know who actually enjoys Adventure of Link. I like the RPG style. I didn't think it was that bad. It has some amazing music. I don't care, Ian. Shake your head all you want. I actually really liked the first 2 Zelda games.
Princess.
Excuse me, Princess Ian. And once you get below those, then Ocarina of Time, Link to the Past, Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, Minish Cap, Skyward Sword. I forgot to put Wind Waker on the list. Actually,
I like you're going beyond 5 here,
I would
Jim.
put Wind Waker actually above Adventure Link. I would say Wind Waker is probably my 5.
Yeah.
So Majora's Mask, the Oracle games, and Link's Awakening, Link Between Worlds, Wind Waker, and then Adventure of Link. I also thought Twilight Princess. I guess I put that just above Ocarina of Time. I don't know.
All right. So
Also, just full disclosure, most of these games I've only played once, especially the newer ones.
Yeah.
I've only played Twilight Princess once. I've only played Skyward Sword once. Yeah.
So FYI, guys, we're just a little over an hour, so we might want to wrap this up soon.
All right, so we can wrap it up then now if you guys want,
We
unless
got
there's any closing
Sean's
remarks.
top 5. Let's get your top 5 before we wrap it up.
Oh yeah.
No, mine was the same as you. Mine was
saying it's exactly the same as me, huh?
yeah. I was saying
Oh,
Majora's
okay.
Mask, and then it was got to be Ocarina, and then it was Breath of the Wild,
Yeah.
and then
Wind Waker, Twilight.
no, I was probably gonna say Oracle,
Okay. So it's
And
not
then,
exactly the same as me.
and then after Oracle's is probably Link's Awakening, maybe.
Yeah. Awakening's solid.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I always liked about Awakening is that it, especially when using your sword, it doesn't feel as like, I don't know. One of my big issues with Link to the Past is that Link's sword feels so wimpy and small, whereas in Link's Awakening, it feels like it actually has proper reach. Like you can. Actually...
It does have that really cool blast, the spiraling thing. I mean, come on, dude, that was pretty cool.
All right, so
Was that the first time it had the spiral?
It was the first time
No.
with the Sparrow, but not the first time it could shoot, because the first two Zelda swords could also shoot.
All right. Well, speaking of shoot, I think we've got to shoot out of here because
Yeah.
that's the end of the episode, everybody.
Woo!
So congratulations on the first episode of the can. Well done, gentlemen.
Yay!
Oh, we have a little thing to. Actually, we probably shouldn't. I was going to play the Zelda find an item thing, but we,
Copyright.
Yeah.
We'll get copyrighted according to Ian, so we probably shouldn't.
Yeah.
But
won't do it.
I'm gonna hum the theme song to Zelda right now. Do 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 do. Do. I'm not gonna do it anymore.
All right.
This was a lot of fun,
We'll
guys.
definitely get copyrighted. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. That's the whole point of this whole
Yeah.
show, is for us, to just get together and catch up. And I'm glad I got to catch up with you guys. I hope we get to do it again very soon.
Oh yeah.
Next time we will have a new topic brought to us by a different member of the group.
All right.
Very much look forward to whatever topics you guys are going to be bringing. And this has been episode 1 of Just Catching Up podcast. You can find this podcast on wherever podcasts can be found that we posted on. I'm not sure where we're eventually going to post this. Probably it's going to be on Twitch, maybe YouTube, maybe
YouTube.
where else?
I wonder
Okay,
if there's
so
some
I'm
way for us
just-
to get on Spotify or something like that.
That is where podcasting apparently is moving to.
Yeah.
Yeah, apparently we're gonna have to.
That's
do
where I got
pull
all
a
mine.
Rogan and make an exclusive deal with Spotify. But that's in the works right now. I'm gonna try to get us some sponsorships and some
Any names?
exclusive
I know who you're
$1 million
talking about.
deals, so we can go to the club and make it rain.
I would just like to
but-
say that I am happy to test out any products for any sponsors. I'm happy to let you know how much I like your earbuds or whatever.
Exactly. Jim will personally test your hair products, all chemical and drug products. You can personally send them to Jim, and he will test them for you, and we'll give you our response. So definitely feel free. Anyone out there who wants to form a sponsorship deal with us, we got your back there. But for now, that's going to do it for the first episode of the podcast. I want to thank each and every single one of you guys for joining us today. So for Ian,
Thank you, Sean, for having me.
for Nathan, and Nathan's
Nathan
audio
got
went
cut.
out again. He put us on mute. Okay, his audio went out.
Stepped on the computer, so I'm using my iPad right now.
So Nathan signing off,
All right. Bye.
and Jim signing off,
Thank you all. This has been a great blast. I've loved it.
and this is Sean signing off for the Just Catching Up podcast. We can't wait to see you guys again. We love you all. Take care. Have a good one.